Like, I mean, really, really hate waiting. You get go for a drive and there's a bit of traffic around and you have to wait for 2 minutes behind a slow car or something like that. I'm really, really impatient. I don't know about you, but really impatient. You come to the supermarket and there's like a 2-person queue in front of you at the supermarket and you go, oh, heck. I was in the supermarket yesterday afternoon and I had this massive bundle of groceries. I didn't want to take a trolley, so I just carried them all so I could go through the self-checkout because I hate waiting in queues behind other people. Waiting at traffic lights. Don't you hate waiting at traffic lights? Just the absolute worst thing in the world. I just wish things would happen faster. Yesterday also when I was in the supermarket, around the supermarket, I went for a drive from Wellington to here and I was praying and wishing that they'd finally open Transmission Gully. They say it's opening on Thursday or Thursday night or whatever down in Wellington. If you go to Wellington at all, you'd know what Transmission Gully is and what a big deal it will be. But I just wish there was a fast forward button on life. I also wish there was a rewind button on life as well, but I wish there was a fast forward button that you just hurry up and happen already, just get there. And I wish there was a fast forward button on some of my troubles. I don't know about you, but I just want to push fast forward and boost and just get out of that thing or get over that thing. Sometimes I feel like a kid waiting at Christmas time. When's Christmas? When's Christmas? Now it's Christmas tomorrow. Heck, I better go and buy some presents or something like that for my son. But when I was younger, it was like, oh, Christmas would never come. You'd count down the hours and the minutes and the seconds, and it was ticking over really slowly. We're going to look at the time of Moses again this morning. Phil started us off last week. We're going to get into Moses in Exodus chapter 2, where I can't imagine what the nation of Israel was going through. Here was this nation that God created and said, hey, you're going to be my special people. Before they even became a real nation, they ended up in slavery. Like a whole nation been deported off to another land. And they were in slavery for hundreds of years, and they really, really needed a rescue. And so God seems to send them in a rescue. This miraculous birth of a child, well, the birth wasn't miraculous, but the rescue of this child, Moses, was just incredible. But it had been 40 years. Acts chapter 7 talks about Moses living in the system of Egypt for 40 years until Moses says, right, I think now is the time for this nation to be rescued. So 40 years. Could you imagine Moses living in Egypt and maybe not seeing the Israelite people, but hearing about them over and over from an Egyptian perspective? The Egyptians hated the Israelites by all accounts at the time. Earlier on, under Joseph, they loved them, but now they just hated them, they despised them, they detested them. And so 40 years on, Moses is living in the Egyptian palace, and he's hearing story after story about those dirty, filthy Israelites. And hearing about how badly they were being treated. I wonder what happened to his own family. I wonder what he heard about his own family. But for 40 years, he's been training in Egypt. If you were to open Acts chapter 7, I think it's Stephen gives a little speech about Moses. All about the nation of Israel, but he includes Moses. And Acts 7 verse 22 describes him this way. It says, Moses was educated in all the wisdom of the Egyptians and was powerful in speech and action. Think about what that means. So for this little boy who's taken under Pharaoh's daughter's wing, he's groomed to possibly become a future leader in in Egypt. He was a leader in Egypt. If you were to read Josephus, the famous Jewish historian, probably one of the most famous historians worldwide of Jewish history, well, the famous historian, he talks about Moses being this incredible military commander, and he talks about one of his particular battles, how he outwits a whole other nation and attacks them and wins this battle. But here in Acts we have it, in fact, that Moses is educated in all the wisdom of the Egyptians, powerful in speech and action. So let's have a think about for a moment the wisdom of the Egyptians. Has anyone ever been to Egypt? Does anyone know anything about Egypt? What do we think of when we think about Egypt? Well, maybe the Nile River, but we think about the pyramids. Well, I do anyway. Incredible engineering, incredible maths involved in that, incredible scientific work in their mummification. Their astronomy apparently was just incredible. People go there now to see their structures and their equipment and their embalming results. And Moses was trained in all of that and all of his military capacity. And he comes to the nation of Israel, the slave people, and he looks at how he can lead and how he can help. And so you come to verse 11, Exodus chapter 2, verse 11, and it says, one day after Moses had grown up, he went out to where his own people were and watched them at their hard labor. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his own people. Looking this way and that, and seeing no one, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. What we see here of Moses here is a picture almost of God. He's growing up, he's going out to his own people and he's watching them, and then he's seeing them, and then in verse 12 he's looking this way and that. Here's Moses standing off from a distance, but he's looking, he's watching, he's looking, he's looking, he's looking. And it's a picture that we get at the end of the passage in verse 25 and 24 and 23. God, counting backwards, God looking and looking and looking on the nation of Israel. So Moses is looking at it with his own two eyes. And he comes across this Egyptian guy, the slave master, absolutely smacking into a Hebrew person. The word beating can be translated beating or killing. This was brutal. This guy's life was at risk. And so Moses steps in to try and help. Well, first of all, he looks to see if anyone's watching. So what does that mean? I don't know 100% what that means. Is he looking to see if there's another Egyptian to come and stop this beating? Or another Hebrew to come and stop this beating? Or is he looking to see if anyone's looking at him? Because he's about to take a huge risk. But he steps in. Just as had been done for him by an Egyptian, he comes to rescue from the hand of the Egyptians. The ability for him to take on this armed and brutal slave driver shows that he probably had military training and skill. And so Moses steps in. If this Egyptian was part of the nation that killed Hebrew babies for at least 40 years, then he's a scary person to deal with. There's a little picture, I just want to pick it up. It's probably not implied in the text, but I think it's an incredible picture. Verse 12, looking this way and that, seeing no one, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. The ground that they're living on there is full of sand. And for Moses, it's a little picture that the sand is not his land. The Israelites don't belong there. They belong in green pasture, in the promised land, and where we now call it the nation of Israel lives. That is their land. But anyway, Moses is taking this huge risk in protecting the Hebrew. If he's found out, if he's caught, his whole life is at stake. Everything he knows is at stake. And so he steps in and helps. The next day, he went out and saw, verse 13, two Hebrews fighting. And he asked the one in the wrong, why are you hitting your fellow Hebrews? I don't know which disturbed him more. Is it the Egyptian fighting the Hebrew, or the Hebrew fighting the Hebrew? Here's Moses thinking, hey, I'm going to come in and I'm going to rescue this nation. Once again, if you read the account in Acts chapter 7, it talks about how Moses understood that he was supposed to be the deliverer, or he was hoping that the Israelites would see him as the deliverer, see him as the rescuer at this time at 40 years old. But it's not just the Egyptians that they're a problem. It's the Hebrews that they are a problem as well. How can you rescue a people who are fighting each other? How can you rescue a people who are fighting the rescuer? But Moses anyway steps in and he thinks it's time to help. He's intolerant of justice. And he takes this massive, massive risk to try and step into the Hebrew affairs. He can't be caught at this. Verse 14, the man said, "Who made you a ruler and judge over us? Are you thinking of killing me as you killed the Egyptian?" Uh-oh. Then Moses was afraid. Just if you've got your Bible open or your highlighter out, highlight that word. Moses was afraid and thought, "What I did must have become known." When it's written about Moses in Acts chapter 7 verse 25, it says Moses thought that his own people would realize that God was using him to rescue them, but they did not. Was he self-appointed? Was he God-appointed at this time? I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's happening. I don't know why it failed. We blame Moses because he stepped in when he shouldn't have stepped in without God's help, but it appears that he might have been appointed by God at that time. Listen again, Acts chapter 7 verse 25. Moses thought that his own people would realize that God was using him to rescue them. God was using him to rescue them, but they did not. He appears to have this passion for rescuing people, but it appears to have come from God himself. The Hebrew was clearly in the wrong, but he ended up fighting Moses too. And what's going wrong here, we can talk about Moses, but we really need to talk about the nation of Israel. Rescuing people who don't want to be rescued is flippin' hard. It's impossible. It doesn't work. And that's what Moses is trying to do here. See, Moses, this military commander, was used to living under the Egyptian system. He's taken on as Pharaoh's grandson. If he gives an order, the Egyptians do it. They don't answer back. They don't fight back. They don't return fire on his orders. But here a Hebrew slave answers the adopted grandson of Pharaoh in a harsh and brutal way. You know, when Jesus comes, he too will be rejected as the rescuer. It wasn't just Moses rejected. Jesus was rejected as the rescuer too. I wonder how many times we reject his help instead of calling out to him because we want to do things our own way, because we don't want to step in. If you're in need of a rescue, call out to Jesus and ask him to help. Let's look at Pharaoh, verse 15. When Pharaoh heard of this, he tried to kill Moses, but Moses fled from Pharaoh and went to live in Midian, where he sat down by a well. So here his fear is going on again. He's afraid of Pharaoh. He's afraid of being caught. He seems to be afraid of the Hebrews, and so he runs. Pharaoh is cruel. And for Moses, one day he went from living in a palace and having the run of Egypt to running away from Egypt, being hated by the Jews, and now he has a bounty on his head. So where does he go to? What land? To Midian, where he sits down by a well. Who are the Midianites? Who are the people of Midian? Where did they come from? How foreign are they in connection to Abraham? To Moses? Are they like the people in Canaan? Are they like the Egyptians? Well, they're a bit different. You see, Abraham, the father of the Hebrew race, the great ancestor where every Hebrew traces their ancestry from, he had several relations. He had one wife named Sarah. When she died, he took another wife. Her name was Keturah. And Keturah had several sons. I think it's about 6 or something like that. And one of his sons' name was Midian. And so when Moses flees to Midian, he's fleeing actually to a distant relative. It reminds me of Isaac and Jacob when they both went to find wives. They went to distant relatives, and that was really important for them for religious reasons or for God reasons. They had to find somebody who were connected close. And there's not a whole lot of young people in this room, so you might be embarrassed to hear this, but when you're looking for a partner, and if you're listening online, just to help the people out here that are all looking away at the moment, when you're looking for a partner, look for someone who's connected religiously or what I mean by that is a believer in Jesus Christ. It's really, really important. And so Moses, is this a chance or is this on purpose? He's not looking for a partner, but he's looking for somewhere safe. And so he goes, there's no other Israelites in the world except for in Egypt, so he goes to the Midianites and he sits down by a well. And it talks about this priest of Midian. So this priest of Midian, later on it says his name's Reuel, appears to be a God-believing priest. He doesn't appear to be one of those priests who are making up their own gods and their own things. He seems to be God-fearing, God-loving, God-serving. Just incredible. Did this happen by chance? Did this happen by Moses' planning? It seems God's got this huge hand while Moses is running out and just going through awful, awful times, leaving the palace to living in a desert. God brings him into this incredible place and introduces him to this amazing family. So a priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came to draw water and fill troughs to water their father's flock. Some shepherds came along and drove them away, but Moses got up and came to their rescue and watered the flock. So after being rescued from the Nile earlier on, Moses has this natural passion for rescuing people. Have a think about it. Dennis Prager pointed this out in his commentary. First of all, Moses defends a Hebrew being beaten by a non-Hebrew. A Hebrew guy being beaten by another non-Hebrew guy. Then he defends a Hebrew from a Hebrew. And now he's defending a group of non-Hebrew women from a group of non-Hebrew men. Moses is not discriminatory in his rescuing. It doesn't matter what station of life people are at. Moses goes in and rescues. And he takes on all the shepherds. I think it talks about his military training or shows his military training once again. Somehow he stands up to all of those shepherds and he drives them off. They're cruel, they're nasty. They're continually driving off those shepherd women. Those 7 women, and they're beating, they're abusing them in whatever way, but Moses stands up to all of those shepherds and they take off. Incredible. And it seems to have been happening for a long time, because when they get home to their father, or let me read it, when the girls return to their father Reuel, he asks them, "Why have you returned so early today?" It's like weird, it's odd to him. Why have you came back? Didn't you get a beating today? Didn't you get driven off? Well, actually, no, an Egyptian rescued us from the shepherds. He even drew water for us and watered the flock. Where is he? Reuel asked his daughters. Why did you leave him? Invite him to have something to eat. So Moses agreed to stay with the man who gave his daughter Zipporah to Moses in marriage. Zipporah gave birth to a son, and Moses named him Gershom, saying, "I've become a foreigner in a foreign land." So Moses is about to spend 40 years in Midian, in the desert of Midian. He becomes a shepherd himself. It's incredible how God is moving and shaping in Moses' life, how he's training him for God's service, for his service to rescue this nation. Moses thought he was ready at 40 years old to rescue because he had all this educational background, because he had all this military experience and training. But God says, you might be ready to take on the Egyptians, but you're not ready to take on the Hebrews. This fickle, terrible bunch. I'm going to train you how to do that. Do you know how I'm going to train you? I'm going to get you to look after sheep. Does anyone remember a little program on TV called A Dog Show? Like where they had competitions, like it was a race, but these competitions were with a dog and a shepherd and a bunch of sheep, and they had to get these sheep through an obstacle course and then get them into a pen. And it staggers me how these sheep, been trained so many times, why the shepherd just couldn't open the gate, and the shepherd go, if I don't go through, there's a gate, there's a shepherd standing by the gate with it open. If I don't run through that gate, I'm going to get chased around this paddock by a dog. I'm just going straight for the gate. But the sheep don't get it. The sheep are stupid. And it's a picture often of God's calling himself a shepherd, saying, hey, my people are sheep. They're vulnerable, they're lost, and they're not so smart. And it's a picture of the nation of Israel. He's going to be trying to herd this people through the wilderness. And he needs to become a shepherd for 40 years to learn how to do it. It's like trying to push water along with a sieve. They move everywhere. Those fighting Israelites, all they've ever known is taking orders and being slaves and being beaten. But now Moses is going to get them to move without beating them, without whipping them. God will have to step in sometimes. But it's not just going to take this well-educated guy, it's going to engineer, it's going to take this skilled shepherd. Earlier on, it appears if Moses did make a mistake, he makes the mistake of helping people without being invited. But God waits for people to cry out. Have a look at the little postscript at the end of this. Verse 23, during that long period, the king of Egypt died. Brutal, brutal king. The Israelites groaned out in their slavery and they cried out. And their cry for help because of their slavery went up to God. And God heard their groaning. He remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. So God looked on the Israelites and was concerned about them. Look at how God acts. He's hearing the groaning. He's hearing the crying out. He's hearing her crying out for help. He's remembering his covenant, his commitment with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He's remembering his people, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so God hears. And I don't know where you're at or what's happening in life now, but God hears. Cry out for him. Cry out for help wherever you are. God sees and God has concern and God remembers his commitment and his compassion towards you. There's three things in our last 3 minutes that I want us to take from here. One is patience. God is incredibly patient, and quite often he pushes the slow forward button on our life instead of the fast forward button. Does that make sense? We want things to happen so fast, but God says, hey, you can't develop and you can't be trained as my person unless you go through this patiently. Oh, I'd love to tell you a story. No, I can't. It's huge. God's patience, having patience is huge. Having perseverance is massive. Have perseverance in our situation. Will God act in your situation? Yes. Will he act like he did for the Egyptians? Well, probably not. But even then, so many Egyptians had died in those previous 200 years. Even in the 40 years of Moses' life, the 80 years of Moses' life, how many kids ended up in the Nile without a basket? Perseverance. God will act. He promises it. It might not be in the way you want. There's a final one. You might not pick it from the story, but there's a passion that Moses has. A passion for rescuing, for stepping in and being God's person. Have patience, have perseverance, have passion. I love the final picture that I want us to finish on in Hebrews. It doesn't seem like there's a lot happening, but it's the longest period of Moses' life. 80 years we've just covered. He's got 40 years left in leadership of the nation of Israel to come. Sorry if you haven't read about Moses before, but that's what happens. He leads the nation of Israel. But here he is going back a little bit after his first 40 years. He's afraid. He's afraid that he's going to be caught by Pharaoh. He's afraid and flees from Pharaoh. But he's going to get this other chance. And when you look at the story in the book of Hebrews of Moses, so this is in the New Testament, looking back a few centuries back on Moses, it talks about him like this. By faith, Hebrews 11:23, by faith Moses' parents hid him for 3 months after he was born because they saw that he was no ordinary child. They were not afraid of the king's edict. I want you to take, that's his heritage. They were not afraid of the king's edict. By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as of greater value than the treasures of Egypt, because he was looking ahead to his reward. By faith he left Egypt, get this, not fearing the king's anger. He persevered because he saw him who is invisible. Moses fled in fear originally, but it's coming back again after massive patience and perseverance and continuing with that passion to rescue people. He's about to enter back into the land. But this time it'll be different. The people are crying out to God, and God is clearly calling him. Let's pray together. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for your Son, Jesus Christ. We thank you for your incredible patience with us. Wow. How frustrating must we be at times, Lord? But we do long to live under your shepherd's staff more. We do long to be shaped and moulded by you through the school of hard knocks, Lord. Just teach us in whatever we're doing, whatever we're working at, Lord, that you are training and developing us for whatever you're calling us to do and be. Help us to trust in you at every moment of our life. Bless everyone who's come to this place today, Lord, and who's listening online. In your holy name, amen. Well, thanks very much, everyone. Bless you, and we'll catch up in a few minutes.